For 17 years, I stood behind register number 3 at the Fresh Market on Alville Road. That little patch of tile, beneath flickering fluorescent lights and the beep of scanned barcodes, was my world. I watched the price tags turn from red to yellow and back again. I saw brands rise and fall like politicians. Customers changed. Seasons changed. Managers came and went. But I stayed. From 8 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. 6 days a week, I stayed. That Thursday in March felt like any other. The gray snow was still piled along the parking lot edges. But spring had already snuck onto the shelves. Easter baskets, packets of seeds, fertilizer stacked beside pink watering cans. Time passed here not by calendar, but by what people came to buy. I was halfway through scanning a family-sized stack of frozen pizzas when I saw her Mrs. Johnson. She came through the line with her 3 children. Just like she had for years. Her youngest, maybe 5, tugged on her sleeve and pointed at the cereal display. Begging for the bright-colored chocolate one. She told him gently, "We already have oatmeal at home." But he wasn't having it. "Please." "Mom," he whined. "I'll be good." Mrs. Johnson Sihil. Eyes heavy. The middle child stood patiently beside the cart, while the oldest flipped through a magazine. Pretending not to be related to either of them, I smiled to myself. That scene, it was my past replaying in real time. My daughter, Imagigan, was always the easy one. If I said no, she'd lower her eyes, nod, and walk away. My son, Cordelius. That boy could stage an emotional protest worthy of an Oscar. He'd cry, "Put?" plead, and then, after he finally wore me down or I stood firm, he'd come crawling back with a hug and a whispered, "I'm sorry, Mama." Now, Imagigen is 38. Working as an accountant and raising her daughter Ruby on her own. She moved to an apartment closer to me after her divorce. And every weekend, Ruby comes running into my arms like nothing's ever changed. Cordelius is 35. A programmer. Lives on the other side of town in some new apartment complex, with a concierge and rooftop gym. Fancy place. He drops by once a month. Maybe. Always in a rush. Asking if I need a light bulb replaced or a faucet tightened. Stays 20 minutes. Says work is busy. Then leaves. 17 years behind this register. And I've learned to read people like price tags. And every time I see that boy walk out my front door, I see a sticker I can't scan. Something unreadable. Something missing. And I can't stop wondering, where did my little boy go, Mercedes? "You daydreamin' again?" Patience's voice cut through the hum of checkout lane chatter, like a soft nudge to the ribs. I blinked, snapping back into the present. She stood beside me, holding a box of tomato paste cans. That same tired smile on her face, the one I'd seen 1,000 times. Patience had worked here nearly as long as I had. 3 years younger? But the years hadn't been kind. Smoking, stress, and a no-good husband who drank more than he worked had carved lines into her face and dulled the light in her eyes. "Just thinking about the kids," I murmured, watching the Johnsons exit with their cart. Brandon still pouting but tantrum-free. Cordelius again. Patience didn't ask for details. She just nodded. Like she always did. She'd heard the stories. How he used to be a chatterbox. How he'd burst through the front door after school, talking a mile a minute about some video game, or who he sat next to in math class. How he used to help me cook on Sundays, slicing carrots with a dull knife and telling me every single thing he'd learned that week. And how now, At 35. I barely know what his living room looks like. He didn't even come to Ruby's birthday last month, I said, rubbing the back of my neck as the register beeped steadily. Imogen was so upset. She tried to hide it, but I could tell. Ruby kept asking where Uncle Cord was all night. What'd he say? Patience asked. Said he had work. I let out a short breath. He always has work. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe he really was just busy. But deep down, I didn't believe that. Cordelius wasn't just absent, he was emotionally gone. He came around like it was a chore, staying just long enough to be polite, never long enough to open up, always looking at his watch, always ready to leave. Maybe he's ashamed, I admitted quietly. Of me. Of my job. Maybe he thinks I don't fit into the life he's built. Patience didn't sugarcoat things. Never had. She bent to place the cans on the bottom shelf, then stood and looked me straight in the eye. Mercedes. He's in his 30s. Got his own life now. Maybe he's just not the family type. But everyone needs family. I whispered. Right, I couldn't help thinking of that boy who once ran into my arms without hesitation. Who once showed me his drawings with so much pride. Now he barely looked me in the eye. I didn't need him to come home every Sunday, or call me every day. I just wanted to know him again. To hear his voice, without the formality. To see in his eyes that I still mattered. Because when your own child starts looking at you like a stranger, it doesn't just hurt, it breaks something deep inside. And I was starting to wonder if it was already too late to fix. It was Friday afternoon when I pulled into my driveway. Bags of groceries in the trunk, and a pharmacy receipt still crumpled in my pocket. Just another ordinary day. I was halfway up the steps when I heard someone call my name. Mercedes, wait. I turned to see Clementine Bishop, my neighbor for over 2 decades, hurrying toward me. Envelope in hand. She had retired a few years back, and now spent her time fussing over her garden and keeping a gentle watch over the neighborhood. Hi. Clementine. I said. Everything all right? Oh yes. Yes. I just needed to ask, do you have Cordelius's mailing address? I want to send him a birthday card. I froze. His birthday. It took me a second to catch my breath. The 28th of March. That's tomorrow. My son's 36th birthday. And I hadn't remembered. No, I mean... Yes, of course. I stammered. He's still living in that complex on the north side. I recited the address by memory. But my voice was shaky. Clementine smiled and tucked the envelope into her purse. Thank you. Dear. I saw him at the post office yesterday. He said he was picking up decorations, throwing a little party at his place tomorrow night. Decorations. A party. At his place. A celebration. Without me. I forced a smile. That's nice of him. He must be getting quite a guest list together. Oh. Nothing big. Just a small get-together. He said. 7 o'clock. Was worried the neighbors might complain about the noise. She chuckled. Anyway. Tell him. I said, happy birthday if you see him. I nodded. But inside, I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. As soon as I stepped inside, I closed the door and leaned back against it. The bags sat untouched. The milk warmed. The bread waited to be shelved, but I just stood there. Stunned. My son was throwing himself a birthday party. And didn't even tell me. I wasn't hurt because I wasn't invited to a party. I was hurt because I wasn't even in his thoughts. When did the 28th of March stop being a sacred day in my heart? When did I let go of that memory the moment I first held him in the hospital? Tiny and wrinkled and perfect, I remembered every detail of that day. How could he forget to remember me? I sat down in the kitchen. The ticking clock? The only sound? I thought maybe I was a bad mother. Maybe I had done something unforgivable. Or maybe he simply didn't see me as part of his life anymore. But whatever the reason, tomorrow was my son's birthday. And for the first time in his life, I didn't know whether I was even allowed to say, "Happy birthday." I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his apartment, the one I hadn't stepped foot in for nearly 2 years. I pictured balloons tied to a doorknob, laughter spilling out, music playing everything a birthday should be, and me, not even a footnote. By morning, I was exhausted physically, emotionally, spiritually. The kind of tired that seeps into your bones. At 10:00 a.m., I dialed Imagigan. She picked up on the third ring. "Hi. Mom. Everything okay? I didn't waste time." "Do you know, it's your brother's birthday tomorrow?" Silence. "Too long." "Yes," she said softly. "I know. Did he invite you?" She hesitated. "He asked me not to tell you." There it was. Confirmation. This wasn't an oversight. This was intentional. I felt my chest tighten. What did I do? Imagigan. Why doesn't he want me there? He doesn't hate you. "Mom," she said gently. "He just has his reasons. He's private. He's my son. He used to tell me everything. That was a long time ago. I'm not trying to embarrass him. I just want to be part of his life." "I know. But Mom, if you show up uninvited, he might see it as crossing a line. And it could push him further away." I didn't say anything. I just stared out the kitchen window, watching the wind shake the last of the dead leaves from the tree in our yard. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, wrestling, torn between love and fear, between the right to see my son and the risk of losing him forever. So I called patience. "Girl, if you don't go now, when are you ever going to?" she said, blunt as always. "What are you afraid of? That he'll slam the door in your face?" "Yes," I said. "Well," she replied, "then you'll know where you stand." "But what if he doesn't? What if he's waiting for you to prove him wrong?" That stuck with me. Waiting for me to prove him wrong. I looked over at the wrapped gift I'd placed on the table earlier that morning. Those expensive noise-canceling headphones I barely understood but knew he'd use. A small piece of me in a box. Maybe Patience was right. Maybe it was already broken. But maybe, just maybe, this was the first step toward fixing it. So at 6:00 p.m., I grabbed my purse, the gift, my coat, and my courage, and I drove toward the part of town where my son had built a life without me. I parked my car a block away from his building. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. It wasn't nerves exactly, it was something deeper. Something between dread and hope. In the passenger seat sat the gift. I had spent over an hour at Best Buy that morning, listening to a boy young enough to be my grandson explain the difference between 4 different types of headphones. I didn't understand most of it, but when he said, "These are great for programmers," I knew I'd found the right pair. They cost more than I should have spent $180, but it didn't matter. Not today. I had it gift wrapped in a silver box with a blue ribbon. Blue was his favorite color when he was a kid. I hoped it still was. Before leaving the house, I stood in front of my closet for too long. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard, but I also didn't want to look like I didn't care. In the end, I settled on black slacks and a soft gray blouse. Simple, clean, respectful. Now I was standing outside his building. It was a sleek new complex modern, coded entrance. Security cameras tucked into corners. I found the button for apartment 207 but didn't press it. I just stared at it. What if he didn't open the door? What if he saw my face, heard my voice, and turned away? I was still frozen there when a couple came walking up. A young woman in a red dress and a man carrying a bottle of wine? They looked like party guests. "Hi there," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Are you going to Cordelius's party?" "Yeah." The girl smiled. "You too." I nodded before I could think. "Yes. Come with us," the guy said, swiping his keycard. The door buzzed open, and just like that I was inside. We rode the elevator together. They laughed about how late they were, how hard it was to choose the right wine. I stood silently, gripping the gift box like it held my entire life. On the second floor, we stepped out. Apartment 207 had music playing behind the door. Warm light spilled from under the threshold. Someone was laughing inside. The guy knocked. The door opened, and a man I didn't recognize smiled wide. "Hey, Josh, Melania, come in. We're about to cut the cake." Then his eyes landed on me. "And this is..." I took a breath. "I'm Cordelius's mother," I said, my voice soft but clear. "Mercedes." His smile faltered for a moment, but then he stepped aside. "Well, please come in." I walked into my son's apartment, holding a gift he didn't expect, and a heart full of questions he might never be ready to answer. But I was here, and that had to count for something. The moment I stepped inside, the world shifted. This wasn't the cold, sterile bachelor pad I'd imagined. His apartment was warm, lived in, even cozy. The walls were painted soft colors, light taupe and muted blue. A tall bookshelf lined the far wall, packed with programming books and framed landscape photos. Not a single family picture. Not one. There were maybe 15 people in the room, young professionals in jeans and sweaters, sipping wine, flipping through vinyls, chatting in pairs. Everyone looked normal, warm, kind, and absolutely surprised to see me. I stood awkwardly near the entrance, clutching the gift box like it was armor. The man who opened the door disappeared into the kitchen. I scanned the room, looking for Cordelius, and then I saw him. He came out of the kitchen laughing, bottle of beer in hand, walking next to another man. His body froze when our eyes met. The smile drained from his face. The bottle nearly slipped from his fingers. "Mom," he said, barely above a whisper. "Hi, Cordelius," I replied, forcing a soft smile. "Happy birthday." I held out the box. He didn't move. The music suddenly felt too loud. The room too still. I could feel eyes on us, his guests trying to pretend they weren't watching. "What are you doing here?" he asked quietly, almost pleading. "I just wanted to say happy birthday," I said. "That's all." He hesitated, then motioned toward the kitchen. "Let's talk." We stepped into the kitchen. It was small, but spotless. Appetizers arranged with care. A cake sat on the counter, lopsided but clearly homemade. Someone had put real effort into it. "I told Imagigan not to tell you," he muttered, placing the beer bottle down. "You didn't want me here. I didn't want to make things uncomfortable for you." For me, he didn't answer. Instead, he ran a hand through his hair, something he always did when he was nervous. Same as when he was 10 and trying to hide a bad grade. "These are my friends," he said finally. "People I work with. They wouldn't understand. Understand what that your mother wanted to wish you a happy birthday. It's more complicated than that." I looked at him, really looked. His shoulders were tense. His eyes kept darting to the door. He looked trapped, afraid. And suddenly, I understood. It wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't even anger. It was fear. He was afraid of what I'd see, of what I might say, of who he had become and whether I'd still love him once. I knew. I looked down at the cake. It had 36 candles, each one telling a year of his life I had helped build, yet somehow felt cut off from now. You don't have to explain everything, I said gently, but I'm here now. And I see you. All of you. For the first time since I'd arrived. He looked me in the eyes. And though he said nothing, I knew he heard me. I stepped out of the kitchen, trying to blend into the gathering, but I knew I didn't belong. Conversations had picked back up, but the atmosphere had shifted. Smiles were tighter. Voices were softer. I could feel it in the air. My presence was unexpected and unwelcome. Then I saw him. Dudley. He was tall, composed, carrying a tray of cake plates, chatting easily with the guests. But what caught my eye wasn't his manner, it was the way he moved beside my son. They didn't speak much. They didn't have to. A look, a nod, a shared smile that said more than words ever could. And when Dudley brushed Cordelius's hand as he passed him a fork, my breath caught in my chest. I'd seen that gesture before, but not from friends. From couples, someone next to me whispered. Dudley baked the cake. Spent 3 hours last night getting it just right. I turned. A woman with short hair, friendly face smiled at me. He and Cord have been together a while now. They're great together. I didn't respond. Couldn't. Really? Together. 2 years. She said. 2 years of a life I knew nothing about. Of birthday cakes I hadn't tasted. Of conversations I wasn't part of. I looked at Dudley again. He was setting down plates, then reaching for a napkin without looking. Cordelius handed one to him. As if they'd done this 100 times. As if this rhythm, this dance of domesticity, was second nature. And for them, it probably was. It hit me then. Hard. My son wasn't just distant because of work. He wasn't just reserved by personality. He was hiding. From me. Not because of shame, but because of fear. Fear that I wouldn't accept him. That I'd judge the love he had found. That I'd reject the one thing that seemed to bring light back into his eyes. And as I watched them laughing quietly over a shared joke, their shoulders brushing like second nature, I didn't feel anger. Or disappointment. I felt grief. Grief for the years I'd missed. The dinners I hadn't been invited to. The holidays spent alone because my son didn't believe I could love him as he was. But beneath the grief, something else bloomed. Understanding. And with it, a quiet, fierce determination. He may have shut me out once, but I would not stay out. Not now that I knew who he truly was. Not now that I had finally seen the truth he'd been too afraid to say out loud. I couldn't sit still. Not after what I had seen. Not after what I had finally understood. Cordelius stood near the stereo, fumbling with a vinyl, trying to look busy. But I saw the tension in his shoulders, the flickers of nervous glances toward me. Dudley noticed too. He whispered something to him and gave his hand a light squeeze. That's when I made up my mind. I walked to the center of the room and gently cleared my throat. Cordelius. I said, "May I say a few words?" He froze. His friends stopped talking. Someone lowered the music. The room quieted. Eyes turned to me not with hostility, but with curiosity. I took a deep breath. "My name is Mercedes," I began, voice trembling just slightly. "I'm Cordelius's mother. And tonight, I realized something that I wish I had realized a long time ago." I glanced at Dudley, then at my son. His face was pale. His lips pressed together tightly. I've been a mother for 36 years. I thought I knew my children. I thought I could tell when something was wrong. Or when something was being hidden. But I missed it. I missed so much. I didn't know about Dudley. I didn't know they lived together. I didn't know the most important person in my son's life. A few guests looked away. Some nodded silently. Rachel held her breath beside the door. I missed birthdays. I missed dinners. I missed the ordinary moments that make a life. And the reason I missed them is because my son was afraid I wouldn't accept him. I paused, my voice cracking. But I didn't stop. I want to say this to everyone here and especially to you. Cordelius, I am sorry. I'm sorry if I ever made you feel that you had to hide. I'm sorry if I said things in the past that made you afraid to be yourself. But I want you to know, right now, in front of the people who love you, nothing, and I mean nothing, could ever make me stop loving you. Cordelius's eyes welled up. He blinked quickly. But it was no use. And Dudley, I continued, I don't know you well yet, but I see the way you look at my son. And I see how he lights up around you. That means something. It means everything. Thank you for loving him when I didn't know how. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was reverent. Then Cordelius stepped forward. And for the first time in years, he hugged me. Tight. Like a son who had been holding his breath for too long. And I hugged him back with every ounce of love I'd been carrying in silence. The room applauded gently. But all I heard was my son's heartbeat against mine. And in that moment, I knew I hadn't lost him. I just found him again. After the hug, everything softened. The awkwardness. The tension. Even the air in the room felt warmer. People smiled genuine. Gentle smiles. A few came over to shake my hand. Rachel gave me a hug before she left and whispered, "He's lucky to have a mom like you." I think he forgot that for a while. When most of the guests had gone, it was just the three of us, Cordelius, Dudley, and me. The apartment had quieted. The music was off. The candles on the cake had burned down to soft wax puddles. And still, I didn't want to leave. We cleaned up together, moving around the kitchen like we'd done it 100 times. Dudley handed me a dish towel. I wiped counters while Cordelius boxed up leftover cake. It wasn't anything special. And yet, it felt like everything. After a while, Cordelius looked over from the sink. "Mom?" he said softly. "Would you like to come for dinner Sunday? Dudley makes a killer lasagna." I smiled before he even finished the sentence. I'd love to. It was past 1:00 a.m. when I finally slipped on my coat. Cordelius walked me down to the car. Just like he used to when he was a teenager and wanted to make sure I got home safe from work. Except this time. He leaned in, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "Thank you for coming. For everything." I sat in the car for a moment before starting the engine. Outside his apartment window, I saw the lights still glowing. Inside that apartment, my son had built a life. And now, for the first time, I wasn't on the outside looking in. I drove home through quiet streets, lit only by stoplights and moonlight. The same roads I had driven for decades. But this time, I felt something different. Light. Relieved. Whole. Tomorrow, I'd call Imagigen and tell her everything. I'd tell her that I finally understood why she kept the truth. And I wouldn't be angry. I'd be grateful. I'd tell Patience, too, how she was right. How love, even when messy and painful, is always worth reaching for. And on Sunday, I'd show up at that apartment not as an intruder, not as a surprise, but as a mother who was finally ready to see her son exactly as he is and be part of his life again. There wouldn't be speeches or tears, just lasagna, laughter, and stories passed over the dinner table. But that's what family is. Isn't it? Not the fantasy, the showing up, the staying, the starting over.